This will be a very different, let's say, lecture or interview from the previous ones. Today's guest is a longtime free speech advocate and contributor to libertarian organizations. He had a very interesting life, to say the least. He ditched his plans to get a PhD in economics to become more active in becoming a producer of pornography. He is the founder of Evil Angel Studios, and as he says, the alleged father of gonzo porn. And please join me in welcoming John Stagliano.
Hey, so can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, good. So I don't like being called Evil Angel Studios. Evil Angel it's like a manufacturer distributor. We help package stuff produced by other people and by myself, which we don't do much ourselves at Evil Angel now.
All right.
But Joey Severo, Rocco Zaffretti, John Leslie in the past, Jason, lots of big people.
All the big names, right?
Deals with.
Yeah. So you had a very interesting life, and I would it would be very long to just list all of the things that were happening. So can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, like in 5 minutes or something, so our viewers can actually get to know you a little bit?
So I went to UCLA. I transferred to go to UCLA from a school in Illinois, and I was majoring in economics. I actually changed my major 6 times before that in 2 years, including wanting to be a baseball player twice, and that didn't work very well. Anyway, so then I got to my senior year and took all theater arts classes and dance classes, and managed to take that experience, and it helped me segue into producing porn movies in '83. But just before that, for 4 years, from '79 to '83, I was a stripper at UCLA. I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback, so it makes me want to talk slower sometimes. I don't know. Sorry.
All right. How bad is the feedback right now?
A little bit. I can ignore it. The fact that I can see you and you can hear me now after all that problem, hey, I'm happy.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So there was this very famous case, which is basically the connection between free speech and pornography. I think in 2010, there was a court case brought against you for obscenity. What was that all about? Well,
there was a anti-obscenity task force created by George Bush administration within the Justice Department in the United States. And they had the task of prosecuting people who distributed pornography. It was essentially a payback by the Bush administration to the religious right, because they had helped him win the election. And they prosecuted some people. They convicted Max Hardcore. They perhaps did a bad job prosecuting me. I don't know. It's so disappointing. I wanted it to go fully through the trial so that I could have my shining moment for my biography where I would win and testify against my lawyer's wishes and all that stuff. However, their case was poorly presented, and their evidence was taken apart by my lawyers, and that pretty much the judge ruled acquittal. No rational jury could convict based on the fact that they couldn't prove I was properly linked to the videos or anything. They didn't even judge whether or not those particular videos were obscene by the legal standard, that the federal law that they had, that they were prosecuting me under. So I did stuff that some people maybe consider obscene. It's a crazy idea. It's a law that you don't know you're breaking until you break it. So I don't like it at all. I'd like to not hear this fucking feedback when I'm talking, but maybe if I lower this, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Okay.
Can you hear us now? All right.
Yeah, but that was a lot of feedback. Okay, let's keep going.
All right. So let's start a little bit more towards the beginning. Like a lot of our viewers don't know what obscenity is and how it is actually defined. And from what I know, it is very vaguely defined. And you, as you said, you don't know when you break the law. Like, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, in Europe, you guys have a little different standard. But in America, we had a history of repressing nude images, anything that was sexually titillating and stuff. And they decided in 1973 to rewrite some more vague laws to a law that arguably was better, where a local community could decide if something was obscene. And the word obscenity is defined legally as having a prurient interest in sex, which means, I don't know what that means, some kind of unhealthy interest in sex, or just if an image disgusts you. You know how, like, when you're a kid, I don't know, the first time I saw sex when I was a kid, it was kind of weird and almost like disgusting. It was, like when you see something garbage or something like that that's very disgusting, there's an emotion that human beings feel, like seeing blood and guts or something like that. And that emotion was translated into law in a way where the law says that if the average person in a community thinks this is obscene or disgusting, then it's banned. So in effect, you could sell pornography of all kinds in San Francisco, New York, maybe Chicago, some other big cities, but other small places could regulate where you could see pornography. And this law actually worked pretty good when the only way you could see pornography was to go to a movie theater first, or a video store. They didn't have video. Well, it was books and 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter, films, 8mm films, and they would be in somebody's neighborhood. So theoretically, you could say, well, we don't want our children passing by these theaters. We don't want them to be exposed to it. And because of that public space kind of thing, I can understand the law. I don't think it's a good law, but it's understandable. However, with the internet and other ways of receiving pornography, that law is obsolete. But they still, in 2010, it was obsolete, but they still decided to prosecute me.
Had you been convicted, you would have been like, the maximum sentence you would have be able to get was 32 years, right?
Correct. 32 years. It was 32 years. Kind of crazy.
That's
but,
extremely crazy, yeah.
Practically speaking, I think I was looking at 10. Get out on bail in 6. I'd be out now.
But, I mean,
I don't know. It's a kind of a horrible thing.
I mean, 10 years would be, almost like any jail time for that would be too much. And I guess that it comes down to being a libertarian issue. What kind of impact the government should have on its citizens creating art?
That is the question right there. Yeah. Art. What is art also is a question, right? Because people don't look at it as art. I go with an explanation that definition that Rand gave of art a long time ago, which is the selective recreation of reality. You're purposely selecting certain aspects of reality, like the sexuality of a very pretty girl, and you're presenting it to other people to enjoy, and they're connecting to that idealized image or somewhat selected vision, and that's the artistic process. If you consider looking at naked bodies and being sexually aroused outside the sphere of how we appreciate art, then maybe you could call it something different, but that's a really bad way of thinking, I think.
Right. So what is, in your opinion, what should the government's role be when it comes to pornography? How should it be regulated? Should it be regulated at all? What's your stance on that? Because I mean, there are multiple people in society basically saying that it should be regulated, sometimes banned, because it has so many negative effects on society. What do you think of that?
Well, negative effects on society are exactly what we're talking about when you talk about anything the government wants to do that we would call the nanny state. Right. So any behavior that people do freely. There's no victim, but other people disapprove of. That's what is considered a victimless crime or whatever. And that pornography is definitely in that category. The question is, should other people be involved in how my psychology is working? And that is a very bad thing. There's all sorts of side effects and really crazy bad things that happen when you try and tell other people what to do, because you're not that person. And we've evolved as a society with a kind of a libertarian vision, in that we have police to prevent people from using fraud or force on other people. And those are valid reasons. If in the creation of pornography, someone was forced, someone was underage, was a child or something like that, that's a valid reason to stop that pornography. But that's not the case in our business.
Right. I see the government in a lot of areas as a threat to freedom of speech. You've been a freedom of speech activist for a long time now. What do you see right now as the largest threats to freedom of speech right now?
Well, okay, if you had asked me this question at the beginning of March, I would probably give you a different answer than today. The world is going in crazy places. It seems like free speech is not valued, that some people can interpret what you say in ways that you had no idea it would be interpreted that way, and that's somehow considered valid and subject to censor on social media, or they're not really asking the government to do stuff yet, but it's possible that they could. It's really a tough time right now with regard to what you can say. People aren't, I was listening to my favorite podcast, and they were talking about how today is this really hard time with regard to race relations and women and all sorts of things in society. And we should be talking about these things. But precisely because of this cancel culture that we live in, people are afraid to say stuff. So we're afraid to discuss the very things we need to be discussing right now. That's a bad thing for society.
In your profession, like when you create content, like what do you see as, is there a certain degree of cancel culture in porn, or is there something which you cannot do for some reason? Not that the law actually prohibits you to do that, but it is kind of frowned upon. It's not politically correct or something like that.
Well, the biggest thing right now is portraying lack of consent, which is an artistic idea in a way. In terms of interpersonal relations, male and female relations have often had elements of lack of consent in art, and that's been a turn on to both men and women. And the lack of consent can be anybody putting a gun to somebody else and saying, "Oh, you got to perform oral sex on me," or something like that. That's clearly way wrong. But the idea that men are physically stronger than women, somewhat different psychologically from women, has led to this complex breakdown right now in society of what that relationship is. Because it seems like we're hardwired to enjoy watching a strong male and a woman submitting to sex. Because when you go to school, usually it's the guys that are more active than girls, asking a pretty girl, a high value girl or something, out, and she's the one controlling her relationships and sexuality, and she's the one who's going to decide to surrender to that guy only because he represents my values and what I want to surrender to. So playing around with this idea of playing hard to get, stuff like that, do you really want me? Show it. That's what we deal with in our art of porno all the time. And now that's come into question as to exactly what stories we can tell. Mm. And the way it's come into question, just to not talk too much, it's our billers on the internet, which are responding to pressure from the government that say, oh, there's certain words you can't say because it looks like you might be talking about lack of consent. So there's a whole list of words, crazy words. You can't, rum and whiskey, You can't use a horse, because you can't say you drove your horse into the stable and then had sex with a girl there. No, because it might be associated with animal sex, and the billers have just software that just looks for those words. They don't really want to look at the context. That's too much work. They're just going to say, don't use those words. And that's what we're operating under right now, as within the last couple of weeks.
I mean, porn is, at least you define it that way, and I do too, a form of art, and it should be interpreted as art. Do you think that there is in the public a lack of, let's say, porn literacy, that they take everything which is depicted there as a depiction of reality and don't really realize that there is so much more context to human sexuality, which, like, more than what can be shown in a, let's say, 30-minute or 60-minute movie? Do you think you get you get in trouble for not showing that context, which you actually cannot show?
You're talking precisely about the problem of people treating what happens in porn different from what happens in a fictional movie.
Right.
In other words,
exactly.
This is supposed to be a representation of real interactions between people, not something that we're trying to create to turn people on. That standard of just trying to turn people on is not the standard we're supposed to use. I don't know how to describe that, but a lot of people think that way. What we think for years, up until like March, was what's going to get the most clicks. You see a girl with big boobs on the front, oh, that's going to get a click. You see interracial, oh my God, the word interracial. That's like maybe gone away now, but because it's hard to define races and stuff like that. But people like to see people who look different from themselves. They're sometimes aroused by people that look different from themselves. They're sometimes sexually intrigued by people that look different from themselves. So they click on it. And that's what we're in. If we don't do the stuff that people click on, we can't stay in business. So that's kind of our thinking. It's agnostic in a way. It's not really values. However, I personally have always said I want Evil Angel to not show abduction and rape. Some people maybe do that on some websites, but I personally just didn't want force to be involved. Actual force for sure. I mean, one of the first things I said to the people who I work with, the directors that I made deals with and stuff, was that I don't want to hear that there's a casting couch in your office. There is no giving up sex for parts and stuff like that. Better not hear about that or you're gone from Evil Angel. But the idea of playing with a casting couch in a fictional thing, that it's crazy, because everybody's acting. And the most important thing to remember is that sometimes when on video you can indulge in looking at abusive behavior, if you want to call it abusive, or just any kind of fictional behavior. You want to see Rocco Siffredi portraying a really big, strong guy, even though I don't feel that way. You like to see that because it gives you an example of what you see. And also, you could see somebody behaving badly in a sexual context and say, oh God, I kind of thought about doing that. I wanted to do that. I can just look at a guy being abusive with a girl and jerk off, and it relieves that stress. And I don't go out into the real world and actually do that thing. That is something that's been studied by medical science, and it actually shows that it works that way. People who have a criminal ideas in their head, they're wrestling with them and stuff. If they have the outlet of being able to look at it on video, they don't go out in the real world and actually do those things. That is one way that one can justify showing stronger porn, porn that maybe I wouldn't particularly like. But most of the porn that we show at Evil Angel, I do particularly like, because really, really bad stuff, which would mean showing force or people tied up and having sex, we don't sell that anyway in my company, so I don't have to go there. However, I don't condemn people for doing that if everything's voluntary and everything's up and up and there's no conning or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I never really understood the double standard there. Like, the porn industry has the standard of depicting sexuality as it happens in, you know, millions of bedrooms, while Hollywood movies and action movies have crazy shootout scenes and nothing, you know, which is not the daily lives of the average American or European for that matter.
Right.
So,
well, sex is more personal, and it involves procreation of the species, and the tribe, which is our nation, the government, whatever, have traditionally tried to control how we have sex and procreate in order to perhaps advance the species more. I don't know.
How do you see porn's impact in the development of the individual sexuality? Is there any responsibility you see with pornographers to actually capture a realistic image?
Oh God. Oh. Well, first thing, if people don't click on your porn, you don't get to make any more porn movies. Nobody
Obviously,
buys their
right?
stuff. You can do it for fun on your own, but you're not doing commercial porn. So we're adjusting to what the market wants. So do I have a responsibility to convey the kind of people? I don't say responsibility, it's a personal mandate.
Mhm.
If I see a company that's producing porn that's clearly catering to, oh God, there's an example of something our company started to do and then we're not doing it. It was called blackmail.com. And I had an argument with my general manager. I didn't want to be micromanaging the company, but I didn't like the concept and the idea of saying, it's like you come home and the babysitter is watching your kid and the babysitter has been, like, you know, stealing from you or something.
Right.
So in order for you not to tell the babysitter's family or whatever, you have to have sex with me. That's blackmail. I don't actually like stories like that. I don't know if we have any stories like that at Evil Angel now, but I don't like them. I don't encourage that, but it could happen. It's voluntary. It does let people fantasize about doing bad things that they may not, that may release that tension, and then they don't do that in reality. I don't know. I have found that freedom works in the long term. If you let people be free and you let them make their own decisions, the consequences of that are always much better than trying to control. You will only think this way and you'll only do that. If the government forces you into that thing, bad side effects almost always happen.
Right, and this ties in nicely with the issue, like the government can enforce certain standards of morality, but that doesn't mean that the general population holds that, or that the population should actually enforce that. I mean, what is normal? That is like the biggest question. Like if we're talking about normal sex, quote unquote, what is that, right? There are some people who find it very appealing, for example, when they watch Rocco's work, and find that actually to be very normal. So the question then is, should the government be enforcing anything apart from what is legal and what is not?
Well, we do know that those things are going to change over time.
Right.
It used to be considered that two people of the same sex somehow being aroused by each other, looking at each other that way, that was like verboten. You go to jail in England for that for years, until the 50s or 60s. It was crazy how that situation looked, and that's all evolved. So what is it that we're thinking is bad today that we might evolve beyond? I'm not sure, but you know, maybe, well, forget about sex for a second, because I have to remember we can't talk about animals with regard to sex at all. But I think animal rights might be one of the next frontiers for society to start recognizing that they're not recognizing now.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't know. I think the most important thing is that people are allowed to freely think what they're going to think. In other words, we don't have a thought police. We don't have somebody saying, "Oh, you're thinking a bad thought." That is in principle wrong. The thing that the government, the people that we give the license to use force to, that's what the government is. Those people should not stop us from expressing ourselves artistically or personally in any way, unless there's somebody's rights equal rights being enriched. It's the libertarian principle, which you guys, I'm sure, didn't come to me to hear elucidated.
I mean, yeah, we're kind of familiar with that.
Yeah.
How libertarian is the industry actually? Like,
oh God, not really.
Not really.
No,
not really.
There are a few people here and there that think like libertarians, certainly in terms of personal life, but economics. The biggest flaw I found in the world and discussions in general is people don't believe the markets really works. Do you have good outcomes? Does the market tend to drive down the wages of labor as low as possible, or does it compete for labor between each other, and then the value is what the person is worth, more or less? Are we working towards that in a free market society, or does a free market society naturally lead to a concentration of wealth and a repression of people? That is the one thing that people think happens that we have to argue against, because it doesn't.
How do you see, when it comes to the market, how do you see the market in pornography right now? There is, in libertarianism, there's this big issue of copyright. And I think that copyright is pretty essential to your work, and it has become, I guess, a little bit under attack in recent years through all the tube sites and stuff. What is your opinion?
Well, there's two things involved with copyright. I think there's trademark. You know, if Madonna does an album and it's Madonna and she owns it, that's hers. And it says, oh, Madonna designed this bag, but in fact, somebody else designed it, and you're using her name, you're appropriating her name. That's like trademark and stuff. That to me is really clear. That's criminal to do. Now, whether or not a piece of video you create, or a picture, or a book you write, the words that you write, are those actual things? Can they not be reproduced? Or can they not be reproduced and attributed to you? Or can they just be reproduced and then not attributed to you? Because when you're making the attribution, you're actually infringing on my brand. You're saying, oh, this was really done by me, but it wasn't, or owned by me. If the world, from the beginning, when I started making porn, if I always knew that tube sites could exist, they couldn't steal my name, but they could steal my content. And if anything that we put out there, it's like media, digital is what killed us, obviously, because digital, it can be reproduced at no cost. It's just ones and zeros. It's not, it's changed the world in terms of everything intellectual, like printed material, journalism, pornography, and all that. But if I had known that there would be no protection for that from the beginning, some institutions might have been developed to help you monetize on your intellectual ideas, even though you couldn't protect the actual product as well as we can now, supposedly, which we can't. So I personally would think that if I could take a song or some music and just take the beat and put it into a movie, and mash up some other art that I see on a wall or something, and put that as an image inside of a porno movie, not ripping off the attribution, not the name or the brand, but just using those artistic elements to fuse together in a mashup, I could create better art. If I knew that those were the rules, that anybody could use my stuff to create better art for them, that world might not be such a bad place. And there was a Reason conference in 2003 where they talked about intellectual property rights. And I stood up and because Nick Gillespie said, it's not hard to write a song. Why does there have to be intellectual property rights in songs? It's easy to write. And I stood up and said, wait, have you ever written a song? I had written one song at the time. Wait, no, that happened a year later. Okay, but in any case, music is hard, and music is precious for me. I have to pay for music. I need it created. And yet, here was a really smart person saying, do we really need copyright protection in music? I'm not an expert in this area, but I've been around these discussions for a long time, and I tend to think that we should have some copyright protection, but man, I'm not, it's above my pay grade.
All right. I mean, it's above like a lot of us. pay grade, you know.
Yeah.
But it's still like the hot button issue in some libertarian circles. So it is what it is. What was the major change from when you started with porn up until now? What was like the biggest change in those years?
From when I started,
Yeah.
well, it's become more real. By real, I mean the goal of what I'm credited with starting Gonzo or something,
Right.
where it's first person POV. I'm in the movie with the camera. The first movies were not done by the standard that I use today. The standard I use today completely is, how do I find real moments? I want to improvise with a girl. I'm picking her up on the street. Please don't act like a porn girl and say, yes, oh God, let's just go have fun. No, be reluctant. Be like a real person. Just improvise off of stuff that pops into your head from something real that's happening inside you. Not some forced imposed idea of what a porn girl should be like. Because what I want to see, oh God, this brings up, I got a name for a book I want to write. I'm not sure if it's a good name. You tell me if it means anything. It's called The Tyranny of the Shot Up Dick. Does that mean anything to you at all? Do you know what it might mean?
Right now, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Okay,
but
I'm proofing a movie yesterday. It's one girl with 5 guys. Every one of the 5 guys is like hard the whole time because he used this chemical you inject into your penis that opens the valve up. So like for 4 or 5 hours, your penis is always hard. It's a great thing if you're trying to create pornographic images, because you never have to worry about a guy not having a hard on. But what you're missing, the crucial thing that you're missing, is that hard-ons happen for a reason. They happen because you're connecting with the other person, and it's a physical response that you can't even control. It just happens, and that response is what I'm trying to capture as a filmmaker. Is what is it that you see about the person that shows that they're really attracted to that person? If the guy shot up his dick, it doesn't matter. I'm hard all the time. Now, the good thing about a shot up penis is it allows girls to show off better. And in my business, the most important thing is letting the girl show off really well. That's really important. We do want to show that connection, but show off sex, just showing the girl's body, what the things that tweak our brain just to give us a hard on when we see the image, that image can be created easier with that bit of fakeness. So,
gotcha.
Anyway,
I mean,
not saying it well. Sorry.
I mean, Gonzo was pretty much a movement which made the actors and actresses more relatable, because you can see the emotion and you can see the interaction with the camera. Do you think that also led to, you know, some big names actually coming up? For example, when I talk to Italian friends, everybody knows Rocco, right? Do you think that helped with building brands around actors, or how do you see that?
Well, Rocco has built a brand. Rocco
is a brand.
Interesting, totally unique person. Motherfucker, every time I do a good movie, he has to do something better, and I can't compete. I can't compete a little bit with ideas. He knows. We were good friends, but he's a unique human being. He's somebody that you can idolize because he has so much self-confidence,
right,
and he understands where his flaws are also, and he understands where his personality might conflict with the mores of society. He's sophisticated like that in his older years, for sure. And I think we need idealized people to look at and say, oh, how would that person react in this situation? Would they have more courage, or would they run away? Would they rationalize it? I'm not sure what. But Rocco's a natural evolution of how we idealize people, make them stars or whatever.
All right. Yeah, I mean, what I thought when I did the research for this interview, obviously, that porn has become way more relatable, as in, the personality of the actors has been, become more apparent than before.
Oh, God, yeah.
How do you see the there's a question from the chat. How do you see the new trend of basically having amateurs on webcams entering the entertainment business? How do you see that? Because that's like they're in full control of displaying themselves, of displaying their personality. Is that just another evolutionary step to that, or is that something?
Okay, amateur porn's exciting because they're new people. Their emotions tend to be more genuine and real. They're not fulfilling some obligation of a script or something like that. They're really responding, and they're really wanting to show off for us. The problem with that, and it's the same situation with webcam, which is taking over the business now with everybody with COVID-19. We're in our houses, and girls can create their own erotic images. What Evil Angel, what I have to offer is better photography, better lighting, better editing, better music, a better package for these erotic images. That's the value that we've added. That's what we add to the product. So amateur stuff doesn't have that. And some people want to see stuff better. Some people want to see stuff more real. That's why they choose amateur.
All right, let's get to some questions from the chat, because that's always the best thing about those kind of interviews. So, what do you think?
Light on me.
What do you think of like conservative anger and disdain for the porn industry, and how do you argue back against the conservatives basically saying that what you're doing is immoral?
Well, they're attributing. They're making a moral evaluation of certain acts. In other words, if you are impelled to show off, if you're a girl, or if you're a guy, the same thing, that showing off to other people is considered immoral because it makes those other people more sexual or something. I don't know, behave in a manner that hurts the family or something. I think that's where it comes from. Every single human being is born with a slightly different psychology and different sexuality. So they're going to answer that question a little bit different. Some people appear to be very conservative and protective of those things, and they want the government to stop other people from freely looking at pornographic images. Whereas I'm more tolerant of it. I believe in freedom. I believe it works. I believe it leads to good results, always. So,
okay, do you see any dangers in consuming pornography? This is one question from the chat. Are there dangers? What is the right way of consuming pornography? What is a healthy way of consuming pornography?
I see dangers in thinking that you can use force to achieve your goals with other people. Does pornography encourage that? Does a movie about a bad person who's a bank robber who somehow gets away with it and stuff, does that influence society negatively? I'm not sure. You got to forbid all behavior that you think negatively influences society. Sex is more important in special ways because it's procreation of the species. If it's my personal thing, which some people disagree with, including my best friend, but I think that like people who live in harsh environments tend to protect sexuality in the family more than people who live in like Polynesian environments, easier places to survive. If you got a harsh environment where you got to worry about, where you're going to find your next meal and protecting the family so the family unit can work better as a survival unit and stuff, then the tribe tends to prescribe certain sexual behaviors that discourages promiscuity because it's important to know who the father is of a child.
Right.
And so that the family unit is strong. So people in like desert communities and stuff like that tend to have a more prescribed sexuality. People who live in Polynesian communities and stuff like that, where survival's not so hard, tend to have a much more permissive sexuality. And I think that's related to our genes and evolution. Some people would say that's totally related to what we learn from when we grow up. So it's a debate.
I mean, there's this whole field of study like evolutionary psychology, which deals with that kind of stuff. So there is definitely some merit to that. Another question from the chat is that usually artists create art in order to have the art understood in a certain way by the consumer. What message are you trying to kind of put out with your art?
Okay.
What do you try to make people understand, for example? Like, for example,
I well understand, because I personally don't just want to create porn scenes right now. That's really uninteresting to me. I would rather try to delve into some interesting psychological idea and create scripts and stuff. And I've done very few movies over the years, but the last few years I've done something called Psychotic Behavior, Hard in Love. Those things dealt with being upset and possessive in a love affair, and Hard in Love. Psychotic Behavior dealt with men and women both being overly possessive, doing weird things, creating tension, and then having make-up sex, which was always fun. But the most important thing that I have to remember all the time is that what I'm doing, the things that I choose to make, often, in fact, most of the time, almost all the time, are not totally focused on what's going to make the most money. There's some psychological idea I want to play around with in terms of, say, in fashionistas, the idea of dominant sex, of power play in fetish play and stuff. The idea that you have to be a good sub and understand what it means to be submissive to somebody in order to be a dominant over somebody. You can't just be a dominant and not ever be a sub. The best dominants are subs first. This is getting kind of sexually sophisticated. Sorry to get into this, but these are
don't worry. Like, keep going.
I mean, I indulge in that idea, hoping I'll connect with some people, but not expecting that I pick the most commercial idea. It's an idea that's important to me. And because I've made a lot of money over the years in porno, I'm able to indulge in a lot of my own personal ideas. So until I run out of money, which might happen soon now. So I don't know.
What are the next ideas, if you want to talk about it?
What are the next ideas? Oh God, let's think. I got a script about the virus, and the idea in that what's really important to me is that I believe the baby boom generation has been taking advantage of young people really badly, and it's gotten out of hand right now. When the federal government of America prints $3 trillion, we just printed it. I mean, they talked to the head of the Federal Reserve. Well, yeah, we just gave it to the government. Technically, they have to pay us back. And who's going to pay them back? My children. Right. And that's so fucked up. I go on this rant in this movie where we pay for their health care through Medicare. We pay for their golf games through Social Security. We pay for their yachts and their homes through their debt and bailouts. And now when things are really bad with all that stuff building up, now you're asking kids to totally suspend your education, all the investment you've done in your life, and just sit at home and wait while this virus goes away. Also, we can protect older people mostly from dying. This is unfair to young people. Right. And that's the idea of that script that I'm trying to convey. And you can do it in a lot of different ways. I actually don't even feel like doing it now because cases are going up in California again. And I don't know what to do. But the script's almost finished. I don't know. I'm going to send it out to the main people. It probably won't get shot until next spring at the earliest, when we have a vaccine, or next summer. The title of it's called The Third Wave. There may be a fourth or fifth wave by then, though. So I don't know. It's crazy.
Are you like the only one in the industry who does that kind of political movies?
Okay, political maybe, economic, I don't know. My background's in economics. There's Caden Cross is director of the year the last couple of years. I don't know. She's really smart, and she puts interesting psychological ideas They tend to be sexual. They don't tend to indulge in things like me so much, but she's good at what she does. Maybe she has some ideas she slips in sometimes, I'm not sure. There are people that are smart enough to do that in porn. So all artists do that though. You know, people who do documentaries, people who do mainstream movies, we're always running in order to get money, you have to have a commercial idea. But if you're passionate about something, you're trying to make the kind of movie that integrates a personal idea with something that's important, personal, like psychologically to you. So you want to do both of those things. In fact, I want to put power, so I have electricity. Whew, we didn't run out. Good. Okay.
You've been very active in the libertarian like movement, and you've been an advocate for libertarian ideas. When did that start, and how did you get into that?
Well, I read Ayn Rand in high school, and I broke up with my first girlfriend who kind of introduced me to Rand, and I was like a really wimpy guy. I don't know. I was a B-class male. She dumped me for this guy I couldn't understand. So I changed my life. I decided I was going to be completely honest with everything. I was going to be ambitious, which I wasn't really ambitious before. And I wanted to be a good person. I was going to examine my psyche. Rand said something really interesting about floating anxiety, which is a concept that she says comes from not thinking through a problem you have in your life. Like, oh my God, I know I have to go to the dentist, but I just don't want to do it. I hate going to the dentist. I'm not going to go anyway, even though I know I want to kiss this girl next week. I'm still not going to go to the dentist. And you think, oh, I really should have gone. And then you forget about it. But you feel this anxiety that's still inside of you. It's because you haven't resolved and thought through the fact that you really thought you should have done this, but you didn't do it. So and most people do that on bigger things. They think, well, like say you're a guard in a Nazi concentration camp or something like that. And you think, well, I don't really think we should be just killing other human beings or putting them in prison or something like that. But I'm not going to think that through, because if I think that through, that will put me in opposition to the government. And now I'm really in trouble. So people's brains, I wanted to purify my brain. I wanted to know that I believed in the stuff and I dealt with every one of my problems. And that was the change in my life. That was when I was 17, 18, 19, whatever. And I did.
How did you then get involved with like not the official libertarian movement, or how did your activism start?
I went to a couple of objectivist events when I was like 18 in Chicago. And then I transferred to go to UCLA when I was 20, and there was something called the Libertarian Alternative, which was a meeting of libertarian speakers in Southern California. I was a charter member of the California Libertarian Party, and I was active. I still give money to them occasionally, and I still go to conventions and things occasionally. So that started way back then in 69, 70, 71, 72. Nobody knew the word libertarian until John Hospers wrote that book called Libertarianism. In fact, you never heard the word libertarian in the national media and press until only 10 years ago, 5 years. I don't know, not very long ago. It's a really recent thing.
And then you started out. I think you had some run-ins with Reason, right?
Reason magazine started in '68. I was active on UCLA campus in '72 in the fall when I was a member of the California Libertarian Party. I brought John Hospers, who was the first Libertarian Party candidate for president. He was teaching at USC. I invited him to come to UCLA in this speakers program, and I was active in the party then in the '72 election. I don't know, whatever. I went to a libertarian thing and we watched our poor results or something like that on TV. So that was my first encounter with the Libertarian Party. I was like an activist and was doing a lot of stuff. I wish I was a Students for Liberty back then. That would have been really interesting.
I mean, I agree. It is very interesting now. So
Yeah.
I bet. Your activism has focused on free speech, right? In the last
You know,
decade, or
because I'm interested in economics,
Mhm.
I more broadly believe in freedom. And I think the subtle things that I talked about, like before, where people don't understand why freedom is better, why capitalism and free enterprise just works better. All right, I'm going to give you my spiel. This is my one spiel. This is what I tell all my libertarian friends. They don't quite understand it. When the government does something, like we have this big homeless problem in Los Angeles right now. You have all these, and you politicians are talking about, we're going to spend all this money to solve it this way. Oh no, we're maybe going to solve it that way. And then they take our money through taxes. They spend it on that thing. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Most of the time it doesn't. But if it doesn't work, they still have their jobs. They
Right.
still got the money. They're going to get more money because they're going to get more taxes, and the same people are going to try and solve the problem again. If you had a society where instead of forcing people to be good, we just let people be good and said, okay, you want to contribute, homeless problem is a horrible thing. I want to give to this charity because they have some really interesting ideas on how maybe we can eliminate the homeless problem. And then they fail. You take your money, you don't give it to them any more money, you give it to another group of people which has another idea. So there's a competition of ideas. With government, there's no competition of ideas. In fact, trying to solve poverty in America since the Great Society in the 60s has become an institution where the government bureaucrats actually don't want people to not be poor anymore because then they don't have a job.
Right.
This is a bad incentive. Whereas if you have a choice to give your money or take it away, just the threat of that funding going away, which doesn't exist in government, which does exist with private charity, changes the behavior of all the people coming up with the ideas on how to solve that problem. And we're fucked because of this, my opinion.
I mean, yeah, there is almost no accountability, especially in the political process with the bureaucrats. I mean, there are some elected officials, but the bureaucrats don't get exchanged anyway.
Well, some
Right.
of these
Some
people are
do,
good,
right? Yeah.
and they might actually have the right idea, and they might actually do a good job. But long run, that system that's in place, the political system of rewards, in other words, your only reward as a public servant is the psychic satisfaction. If you're a private charity, your reward might be getting more money and being able to do more things because people like what you did. I mean, it doesn't work very well in the political area when decisions are made politically. But if they're made economically, and you assume that people care about their fellow man, which we all do, I would give money to a charity to help solve poverty if I thought they had good ideas. And then if they had bad ideas, they'd take it away and give it to somebody else. Right now I give to Reason because Reason I think has the best ideas out there. And even though I'm not doing so well financially as I was a few years ago, that's for sure. But I still give money to Reason because they have the best ideas, in my opinion.
Right. How difficult is that pitch in California?
How difficult is what?
How difficult is that line of argumentation, or is that pitch for libertarianism and limited government in California?
How difficult is it to convince people of that in everyday life? It's interesting. You know, I'm gonna go have coffee with a couple of people in the porn business, and they're both kind of like libertarians. Certainly from a personal point of view, they believe in freedom of expression and ideas and people being able to do whatever they want and how that doesn't hurt other people. Understanding the fundamentals of economics and how a big company has to serve the customers or else they're out of business. They don't fundamentally understand that. And that's where it helped for me to just study economics and understand the principles and pricing systems and price discrimination and all sorts of weird things that just happen. Why do they happen? So understanding that is useful.
All right, let me go to another question from YouTube actually. In what way has pornography changed, like in its success for the last 40 years? You know, it has been growing. How did it change the way it is viewed today? Like how did the perception of porn change from when you started as an art medium?
How did the perception of society of porn
Yeah,
change?
exactly. Yeah.
This is an interesting question today, right now, because it may be changing again. But certainly there seems to be a straight line progression of people being really repressed about showing ankles or knees or miniskirts or anything. In the 30s, they had a film czar or something whose job was to protect the morals of the people who were consuming Hollywood product and stuff. I can't remember the guy's name. I read some interesting stuff. But today, okay, I was blessed with entering puberty at the time of what we called the sexual revolution, where in the 60s people started opening up and becoming more free about girls showing off, guys just being themselves, just not being inhibited and thinking that they were going to get in trouble because of their sexuality. And now we've had this great change where people who are gay can express their feelings more and more in society. It's you don't have to worry about getting beat up unless you live in Russia, of course, which is on another. I believe Russia, even though Russians are very sexual, they tend to have that narrow point of view that says you have to like heterosexual sex and not gay sex. It's an interesting revelation about how your psyche works. If you hate gay people, usually you might wind up hating pornography and stuff because you don't believe people should be free. You're not tolerant of differences. And our society, up until a few months ago, was becoming more and more tolerant of the differences of people, their different sexuality. Evil Angel did trans porn because one of my main directors said he really wanted to do that. This was 1998, and there was very little of it then, and we've developed a reputation. Evil Angel has the reputation of doing a good job with trans porn and having the most of it. 40% of our product is trans, which is interesting.
Did you face any backlash, like as you being pioneers in that genre? Like, did you face any backlash from starting it?
Well, not actual backlash to my commercial success. Personally, I've had some people express things to me, but it's been really minor. And being in Southern California here, people are much more tolerant of alternate lifestyles and stuff. If I was in the middle of America, I might have more trouble. But I don't go to trans bars, and at least not since the 90s. So I shouldn't talk. Anyway, I'm not living that life, but everyday life for somebody who's gay or trans or something still is a little bit difficult in California, but still a lot better here in Southern California than in most rest of the nation.
Do you see porn showing the variety of sexuality? Do you see a use in that, like a benefit for society in that? Because I mean, I also lived some months in Middle America, which was very conservative, and though their like sex education and talking about sex was very limited, was very negative, sex negative. Do you think that pornography serves a role in that by basically showing the varieties of sexuality?
So the question is, do people learn about what to do in sex? What's tolerated in sex? Because I guess, some straight porn movies have shown hostility towards homosexuality on occasion, subtly, maybe. That doesn't happen at all anymore. People learn about, oh God, I'm going to have to say this. Sex has been developed in porn because we have good testing. So oftentimes I'd hear a girl says, I want to be experimental with porn. I want to fuck different people, but it's not safe. But if I'm in porn, it's much, much safer. Maybe not 100% safe, but much, much safer. So people have an inclination towards experimenting and exploring find a home in porn, because we're very tolerant of that, and it has a commercial appeal, and it's much safer because everybody's tested every 2 weeks for everything now for the last years now.
Right. I do think that in there are some issues or like some topics within sexuality which are more frowned upon, which are more like not talked about. For example, the rise of female sexuality and stuff. And there's also a question from the chat. What do you think of the recent rise of pornography, which is targeted towards women specifically? Are you planning to do that in the future, or what is your
other companies have done that and have maybe been better positioned. There was something called Girlfriends Films, which was a surprising success 10 or 15 years ago. They weren't doing what I would consider good porn. Their packaging looked a little dated, but what they were doing was they were exploring the psychology of women relating to women, which had not been explored. It was an untapped market, and we didn't know that. And also in today's society, women are asserting their sexuality more and more. So the percentage of women looking at porn is growing, maybe not fast or anything like that,
right.
But there's a solid part of the market that orients itself just towards female customers. I'm not female. I don't have as many intuitive insights into what to create. So I try and stay in my lane and do what I do best, because it's hard enough making money. So
yeah, I mean that's like one of the issues there, that most of the visual pornography is actually targeted towards guys, because they're the main viewers of that kind of stuff. If we go for like written pornography, we have a completely different story, I guess.
Yes.
So
more women read romance
exactly.
novels. They're turned on more psychologically than they are physically. And I think that's shaped by evolution, although some people disagree with me. Like my best friend argues that it's somehow nurture, our environment, that controls what we're turned on by. But I think it's shaped by, to me, it's obvious. It's obvious that, we were a hunter-gatherer family unit. And if you had a physically strong male who could go out and kill the food, and if you had a skilled homemaker who knew how to take care of kids and knew how to like manage those skills better, you survived more. And that somehow those psychological ideas were somewhat shaped by evolution. That's a questionable thing, but a lot of people believe.
Is there like an open discussion about those kind of topics within the industry, like a philosophical discussion of where that comes from, or is it sometimes just money making?
Not so much, because we're really worried about survival. Certainly right now, since the advent of tube sites and digital stuff, I've had less money to explore other ideas. I just have to try and find what's going to sell, or else I'm out of business, which could happen within the year anyway. I don't know. Fuck. Serious. I have a different model. I sell the integrity of Evil Angel to independent producers and say, I will be honest with you and deliver all the money to you that you sell, but I'll only keep a percentage of the gross sales, and I'll encourage you to be to create the best movies you can. But I'm selling on you on the idea that I'm not going to rip you off. When I started in 1990, I took on my first outside directors. That was a really valuable thing, because porno being quasi-legal, where, sometimes it's illegal, sometimes you can go to jail, it attracts people that are good at dealing in quasi-legal areas. So if you're like somebody who's used to like running drugs or prostitution, you're not that afraid of getting busted, just like you're not that afraid of getting busted as a pornographer. So criminal elements were attracted to pornography, like the mafia and stuff, because it was quasi-legal. And now not so much, because it's not so much quasi-legal anymore. People don't understand that relationship, but when you pass a law that say drugs are illegal, you're creating work for criminals. Right. I'm reading this book. I just put this book down because one of the major points in the book was how this journalist was going to do an expose on how he was running girls from Eastern Europe into Western Europe, and they were like low-life criminals and stuff, and they were bad pimps and stuff. And my head's starting to explode, because the most obvious thing is the reason why those criminals even have a job is because prostitution is illegal. If prostitution wasn't illegal, there would be no job for them. They would be like normal business people that would like try and build a reputation to attract pretty girls to come and stuff like that, as opposed to doing everything quasi-legal where you could get busted and go into jail, so you have to sneak around and stuff. I don't have to lecture you guys. You're libertarians, right? You know
Right.
about this.
I mean, we
Anyway,
know it.
Yeah, you know that shit already. Anyway, but that's, I don't know. I've told you most of my philosophy here in a short period of time.
And I mean, that's what we kind of want to find out in this interview, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
so I did one other thing that was economically interesting at my company. I started Evil Angel to sell my movies. When I wanted to sell other people's movies, I only did it because they were friends of mine and they didn't have a distribution deal. And by a distribution deal, somebody would like give you $20,000 to do a movie, and you turn in an edited finished product, and then they just pay you, and then you're done with it. I wanted people to build a reputation, because in the years before I started Evil Angel, I'd sell a movie to VCA. They wouldn't even put my name on the box. They couldn't care less who made the movie. I wanted people to build a reputation so that the fans knew that if my name's on the box, it's up to a certain level. You can depend on that quality. So I branded directors, and I also didn't finance them. I lent them some money at first, but they paid me back, a few people. Mostly it was people that had their own money. And that organization model was imitated by a few people, abandoned by a few people, whatever. I think it comes into this bottom down mentality of the creation of new ideas that I believe in. I don't believe in one CEO of a company telling everybody, oh, we're going to do this because I think this is a good idea or whatever. Having a whole series of directors, like 10 of them at my company or whatever, how many I have right now, they come up with their own ideas on what good porn is. They risk their own capital. They're the ones responsible. And I've had to part ways with a couple of general managers recently because they thought that they were smarter than the directors that I had. They were smarter than Rocco Siffredi. They knew what should be produced better because they could see the data, which is not easy to read under any circumstances. I believe in ideas generated from the bottom up instead of the top down. You just have to know how to get out of the way and not have an ego that gets in the way of saying, oh, it's my idea, it has to be the best. No, just be open to what the best ideas are.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
I mean, it's quite fascinating to have that like philosophical backing in there.
I've had to say this recently a couple of times. That way of organizing my company was wildly successful for a lot of years until tube sites came along and all sorts of shit. And right now it's important to note that tube sites monetize. They get money from pornography in a different way than what I do. They get money from ads. I get money from selling hard goods, which can be ripped off by selling files through internet distribution, which all can be ripped off. So it's not clear that I'm going to survive into the future. I may have to change. I am changing, but it's a tough battle right now.
Yeah, I bet. There's another question from the chat. What was your relationship to porn before you actually started entering the industry?
I was a fan. I mean, I looked at porn movies all the time. I liked them. I would rent a stack of tapes. That's what they're called. I forgot what they were called. Tapes. I would rent a stack of tapes and just examine them in like 82, 83, whatever, when I had and then I produced movies after that. And I continued to be a fan. I started Evil Angel. I have access to free porn now, all I want, but just about. But I was always a fan. I always felt like I was a more sexually active person. Plus, I was intrigued by stories and drama and stuff, and just the drama of I mean, a porn scene and how a girl takes her clothes off, how she relates to the guys. These are all dramatic decisions. They're related to your personality, how you think another person's going to perceive sexual tension. You're trying to communicate sexual tension. Those are filmmaking ideas. And it was really exciting to me to integrate my sexual ideas with my filmmaking ideas.
Do you think that complexity of porn, that, you know, how much thought goes into it, is appreciated by the general public? Or
say that again? I missed the beginning.
Do you think that complexity, or like how much thought goes into producing and filming those movies, do you think the public is aware of that, or is appreciative of that?
Well, to some extent. I live here in Southern California, where they produce mainstream movies, and the crew members and stuff go back and forth between porn. There's understanding what you can do in porn and what they do in real movies is important. And if you want to produce porn on a high level, you have to understand you're trying to shoot so much stuff in one day in porn. In the studios, they take more time to shoot the same amount of stuff. And that time is spent using more crew members. They have better props, better wardrobe, better lighting, better action, better story too, and stuff, because you got better people you're working with. So you have to work within your limitations in porn, but still you're leading the viewer on a journey. You're storytelling. And you can do that if you're really smart on a really low budget, or you can do it really badly on a really high budget if you make mistakes and stuff. So it's a challenge, and I love it.
What are, like, considering that the tube sites are currently taking over, or at least, you know, getting bigger and bigger, what kind of entrepreneurial challenges, like what are your answers to that? Or I don't know if you want to talk about here, but like what is your plan to deal with that?
Well, we're talking about some things, some of us people that are on not monetizing through the tube site thing. I'm not going to talk specific names, brand names. There are people that look like monopolies that dominate my business in the tube area, and I'm not going to mention their name, but we do use them as our number one marketer for giving clips to, and then they do click-throughs and they share affiliate money. Which the great thing about the internet is that you can be a little entrepreneur on your own. You can take all these evil angel elements that you can get from our webmaster, create your own little site with your own special cute name or something, and you can drive traffic through the content that you have to get people to sign up for my site. And if that person comes from the stuff that you've used to attract them, then you can get the first month sign up or some split or some payout. You know, and that's the great thing about the internet, is it allows for all this entrepreneurship. So
how do you
I still get this feedback, and it infringes the way I talk a bit. I'm sorry.
All right. So currently you have this virus situation. How has that impacted your business? And then we can talk about how do you think it has impacted like America itself, like in terms of like your philosophical views. But first, how has it impacted your industry?
Well, we don't know when we're going to start again. I've talked to some of my directors, and I'm not producing movies myself. I mean, I have my script. I shot one scene for a new Fashionistas, which I'm editing. It's really elaborate. It's wonderful, but there's no movie there. And I've told the people that own their own product and control them, I'm not going to tell you when or how to shoot. You need to decide that safety level yourself. There cannot be any fraud or misconception or anything on the set. That's not acceptable. But I don't know when it's going to be safe. You know, some of my I have performer directors, guys like Rocco Siffredi, who can hold the camera himself and can shoot a girl. They can both be COVID tested. And if they decide to shoot, that's their business. Doing a bigger production like Fashionistas or like Caden Cross, I mentioned her name earlier. She does higher productions with a lot of crew and stuff. It's much more difficult to do that. But going back to the higher budget productions, might take having a really good vaccine in place. I don't know that that's going to happen short term. Gonzo productions, smaller crews, like one cameraman who's also the still photographer and a makeup artist, and that's the only crew. That's my typical crew for a low budget scene. And then 2 talent, that's 4 people to be tested. That's not too many. You could do that. I'm not going to judge how people decide to do that, but they have to turn in a COVID test now that's within, well, 14 days, but really the convention might be 2 days or 3 days. We're not sure. That's being worked out right now. But that we have to have that on file now. But nobody's shooting yet. Maybe July. Maybe some people are shooting. I don't know. It's not my job to find out.
Right. You alluded to that the younger generation is suffering the most from this current situation.
Yes.
What's the situation on the ground right now in terms of California? What do you see for businesses and stuff like that?
Southern California, I sat at an indoor restaurant and had dinner with my 81-year-old dance teacher friend. I own a dance studio, and he runs the space and stuff. And we had breakfast the other day. The first time I've been in a restaurant in 3 months or 4, whatever, beginning of March. So that seemed safe. People were all separated and stuff. Some restaurants are opening up. The world, you got to understand from an economic point of view, people's demand curves are changed now radically. They're going to be changed a lot more in the future. So if you got a restaurant and you decided you could pay a certain amount of rent, maybe a high rent because it was on a high visibility corner, and now you can only put 50% or even 75% of your people in that room and not 100% during the rush hour at dinner, it's possible you're out of business. All sorts of people are going to be out of business. I'm not sure how this is going to work its way through the society, but there's going to be a lot of investments that will have to be liquidated, and then new investments and new places to make money. The thing that I'm hopeful for is that technology will save us. We'll have therapies that are being developed right now, and a good vaccine looks promising, and that'll be developed. Plus, the liquidation of bad investments, like a restaurant or a business that had a lot of people, and then changing that to the new preference system of people, trying to find that market. That happens faster today than ever before with computers and software and stuff. It's just, the world is different. Even from 5 years ago, we have so much more software and so many more different ways to do things. Running my business is so much easier than it was when I started 30 years ago. It's like night and day.
All right, we're approaching the end of this interview, and we have still a couple of questions. There is one question: is how can we help the porn industry to survive? I don't know if it's like kind
joining
of
my site, evilangel.com. I'll get a percentage of that money. If you look at my guys' scenes, they'll get some of that money. That's the only way. Just remember, we deliver better quality and full scenes, whereas tube sites have somewhat lower quality, and they're hard. It's harder to find the good stuff. I like tube sites myself. I shouldn't say that, but that's my personal preference. I like my company too, man.
All right.
Download free stuff from those pirate sites? Then you'll help us survive. That's our only hope.
All right. Is there, in terms of your philosophy, in terms of your libertarian worldview, is there something which, in your opinion, young people like us should fight for in the near future, or what do you see as our biggest challenge? Could be related to freedom of speech and personal freedom, but also economic freedom. What do you think?
Having a clear understanding of what authoritarianism is and the nanny state. Because the nanny state's what tells us to wear masks all the time. I happen to agree with it. It's in sophisticated places, jurisdictions in America, people understand that you can't actually force people to do it, but if you're a private business and you've got a supermarket and you say everybody who comes in has to wear a mask, that's your choice. And you can exclude people from coming in, and that's tolerated now. Hopefully, people just need to understand the market. They need to understand that capitalism works, freedom works, and that there's always bad side effects and stuff that happens when you stop freedom. And there's a lot. People should work in the area that they're best suited to, and explain it to the people around them.
I don't know. That I think that was beautiful. That was beautiful closing words.
Thank you, sir.
We thank you very much for having this interview. That was maybe one of the most interesting interviews we had.
Just remember, I'm 68 years old, and you asked a technologically challenged middle-aged man to do something he wasn't all that familiar with, so it delayed things a bit. I'm sorry. It's probably my fault.
That's probably on us, actually, but don't worry about it. We thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And I'll be in Berlin sometime, if not this year, next year.
When you're there, tell me.
Okay, I will.
We can do that. We can do that. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the viewers out there. It was fun, and yeah, thanks for following us. If you want to follow us on other topics, we have a lot of interesting speakers coming up in the next weeks. So make sure to follow us on our social media, and especially YouTube and Facebook, to stay up to date with what we're doing. And see you the next time. Thank you very much.
All right.